Many of us have come home late at night at least once in our lives, alone. Of course, at such a moment, many feel anxiety and some fear. But at the same time, each of us thinks that something bad is happening somewhere far away, to someone else, but I'm definitely going to be fine. Would you agree that that's what most people think? On January 16, 2019, 21-year-old Aiia Maasarwe got off a tram in the Australian city of Melbourne around midnight. Surveillance cameras located nearby captured her walking down the street, and it seemed that nothing foreshadowed trouble. It took about 1.5 miles to walk from the tram stop to her apartment. On the way home, she called her sister because it gave her a sense of security. But after 5 minutes, Aiya's sister heard her eerie scream and a sound similar to the sound of a falling phone. Then, she heard the sounds of cars passing by. Aiia never returned to her phone, and it wasn't until the next morning that it became known what had happened to her. To understand how Aiia ended up on that night street in Melbourne, we need to get to know her life better. Aiia was born in 1997 in Israel. She was one of 4 daughters of her parents. Since early childhood, she stood out among her peers with her intelligence. She was fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, and Chinese. She studied at Shanghai University in China, where she studied business. Her father ran a business in China, and Aiia planned to work for his company after she graduated. In August 2018, she arrived in Melbourne on an exchange program to study at La Trobe University. She chose a business line to complement the knowledge she had already gained at Shanghai University. In addition, she saw Australia as a place where she could improve her English language skills. She quickly got used to the rhythm of life in a new city. Having settled near the campus, she got acquainted with Australian culture, attended lectures, and made new friends. It seemed that everything was going on as usual. She had a lot of plans for life. But, unfortunately, all these plans collapsed on January 15, 2019. That day started as usual for Aiia. She attended lectures, met with friends, and planned to attend a comedy show at the Factory Theatre in the city center for the evening. She was a cheerful young woman and loved humor, so she saw attending the show as a great opportunity to relax after a day of study at the university. The show started around 9 o'clock in the evening and lasted about 2 hours. In a good mood, Aiia went outside and went to the nearest tram stop. The tram ride was unremarkable, just a journey home through Melbourne at night after an eventful day. As I said, around midnight, Aiia got off the tram and immediately dialed the number of her sister Ruba, who lived in Israel. She wanted to talk to her as she walked to her apartment. They chatted about the show, about the plans for tomorrow, and they always had something to discuss. Aiia was joking and in a great mood, but after about 5 minutes, Ruba heard Aiia screaming and cursing at someone, demanding to get her hands off her. Ruba heard the sound of the phone falling, then the sounds of banging, and then silence and only the sounds of cars passing by. It's terrible. I mean, can you imagine what Ruba was going through at that moment? She just heard someone attacking her sister, and it's just a heartbreaking moment, isn't it? But it's also scary in this situation that Aiia was on another continent, in a city where she doesn't have any family members around who are ready to rush to help and take any action at the same second. Ruba experienced a real horror, and she later described that moment as the scariest in her life. She was calling her sister's name and shouting into the phone, but she couldn't hear Aia's voice anymore. She dropped the call and started calling back, but Aiia wasn't answering. Being in a state of shock, Ruba contacted other family members because she was confused and did not know what to do. Her parents and sisters started calling and texting Aiia through various apps, but there was no response. Eventually, the family contacted the Australian police. By that time, it was about 6 a.m. in Melbourne. About an hour later, a bystander who was on his way to work that morning noticed something unusual in the bushes near the mall. He decided to get closer and hoped that it would not be what it seemed from the outside. But unfortunately, It really was the body of a young woman, partially naked and burned, with obvious injuries. The body was lying just a few minutes' walk from the tram stop where Aiia got off the night before and about a mile from her apartment. A passerby immediately contacted the police. The police officers who arrived at the scene cordoned off the crime scene, and it was clear from the first glance at the body that it was a crime. Various items were scattered around him, including a bag, AirPods headphones, and other items that later became key evidence. There were serious injuries on the victim's head and signs of an arson attempt on his body. Apparently, the perpetrator tried to destroy the evidence with the help of fire, but the fire did not spread much. The victim's identity was quickly established, and documents in the name of Aiia Maasarwe were found with her. Her family, who were already in a panic after the strange call, received the worst possible news from the Australian authorities. Aia's father, Aiia Maasarwe, later flew to Melbourne to identify his daughter's body. He later said that this moment broke his heart forever. Such a violent incident with an international student immediately attracted the attention of the media. Police held a press conference where the detective called the attack horrific and cowardly. At the same time, the police believed from the very beginning that the attack on Aiia was most likely an accidental act, and not a planned one. Newspaper headlines and television reports spoke of a shocking attack on a student in Melbourne, causing a wave of fear and anger in society. This made a special impression on the students of the university where Aiia studied. Female students were afraid to walk alone in the evenings, and the campus increased security measures. The attack on Aiia took place in a quiet suburb where such crimes were not common. On the contrary, it was a low-crime area, and such a crime seemed unthinkable. On the evening of January 17th, hundreds of people gathered in the center of Melbourne to light candles and honor Aia's memory. These actions lasted for several days, and people left flowers and notes at the crime scene. Similar events were held in Israel, Aia's home country. The family and the public demanded answers, and the police did everything possible to find the person responsible for this terrible crime. A special group of detectives was formed, who worked around the clock to collect all possible evidence. It was important for them not to miss a single detail, because it could ultimately affect the outcome of the case. It is not unusual for the police not to disclose the details of the investigation to the public, and only after a while can we find out how events unfolded and what evidence was found. This case was no exception. Only later did it become known that during the inspection of the crime scene, criminologists found a lot of key evidence: a metal pipe, presumably used as a weapon, with traces of blood, a t-shirt, which also had blood on it, a discarded baseball cap, a cigarette butt, and other items that could belong to the criminal. All these clues were sent to the laboratory. During the analysis, the experts were able to extract DNA profiles, but now it was necessary to find out who they belonged to. But that's not all. There were signs of a struggle, and her torn clothes on the ground where Aia's body was found. She desperately resisted, as a result of which there were pieces of the criminal's skin under her nails, which also became an important clue. I mentioned earlier, but I remind you that the perpetrator tried to set fire to the body, but the fire could not spread much, and this allowed many clues to be preserved. At the same time, detectives were searching for digital evidence such as CCTV footage. Cameras at and near the tram stop allowed police to see Aiia get off the tram around midnight. On recordings from other cameras, investigators saw a suspicious man. He was wandering around, and on his head was a baseball cap, similar to the one that was found near the body. The man seemed to be wandering aimlessly down the street until, by some terrible chance, he saw Aiia. I want to ask you, do you believe in the existence of fate at such moments? I mean, if Aiia had gone down a different street, or the tram had been delayed for at least a few minutes, then everything could have turned out differently, right? What do you think about this? I would be interested to know your opinion, and you can share it in the comments. When the forensic experts performed the autopsy, the investigators had a clearer understanding of what had happened. The autopsy results confirmed the brutality of the attack. Experts called the official cause of death multiple head injuries from blunt force trauma, the same pipe that was found at the crime scene. Aiia was hit at least 4 times on the head and face with a metal pipe. The injuries were so severe that death occurred quickly, presumably within a few minutes. Besides, the autopsy confirmed what the detectives had already guessed. Aia's torn clothes and the fact that she was partially naked indicated a motive for this crime. Before I say this, I want to apologize for using such language, but there are certain rules on YouTube. So, experts have established that during or immediately after the attack, there was contact between Aiia and the perpetrator against her will. This was indicated by characteristic injuries and DNA traces in intimate areas. Also, during the forensic medical examination, it was established that the fire was not the cause of death. It was an attempt to destroy evidence. In the course of the ongoing investigation and attempts to identify the monster that freely roams the streets, detectives interviewed many witnesses. They started with Aia's friends, questioned university students, residents of the area, and even passengers on the tram in which Aiia was traveling. None of them knew who might want to harm Aiia, and no one saw the attack itself. This confirmed the police's theory that Aiia could have been an accidental victim. Digital technology experts checked her phone and ruled out personal motives. All the evidence pointed to one person unknown so far. DNA from the cigarette butt, t-shirt, and baseball cap matched samples from the body. The investigation progressed rapidly, and 2 days after the discovery of the body, the police arrested the suspect. On January 18, 2019, detectives arrested 20-year-old Cody Herman. The arrest took place in the park, where Herman was sitting quietly in the barbecue area, unaware that handcuffs would be put on his wrists in a minute. He did not resist arrest. It can be said that Herman's arrest was the culmination of continuous police work for 2 days. DNA samples were taken from him at the police station, which matched DNA samples from a cigarette butt, baseball cap, other evidence, and DNA samples found on Aia's body. In addition, surveillance footage showed Herman wandering in the area on the night of the attack on Aiia. However, during the interrogation, he denied his involvement in this crime. On January 19, 2019, Herman was formally charged. During the presentation of the charges in court, he did not show emotion and remained silent all the time. Given the gravity of what he had done, the judge decided to keep him in custody without the right to bail. For the Maasarwe family, this arrest was a small, but still a relief in the grief that had befallen them. Aia's father, Saeed, thanked the police for quickly finding the perpetrator, but stressed that nothing would bring his daughter back. Now let's try to figure out who Cody Herman is and whether there was any connection between him and Aiia. In this case, who he was is important, because during the trial, his lawyers will use his past as a mitigating circumstance. Herman entered the world in 1998 to parents who belonged to the Aboriginal community and struggled financially in North Melbourne. The community where his family resided faced numerous social issues. The situation at home became even more unbearable than the neighborhood problems. His father struggled with alcoholism while dealing with mental health issues. The family experienced complete destruction whenever his drinking episodes occurred because they happened frequently. The father frequently abused his wife and son through physical attacks, which caused both physical wounds and emotional trauma. Cody Herman periodically moved out of his mother's care due to her alcohol and substance abuse, and therefore spent some time in foster care. From an early age, he suffered from mental problems, but did not have constant access to medical care. In 2016, he last sought help from the Health Service for mental health problems. By that time, he had already started using alcohol, illegal substances, and often spent the night on the street or in abandoned buildings. Despite all the difficulties, he tried to find a way out of the difficulties of life through creativity, and dreamed of becoming a rap artist. Under the pseudonym MC Codez, he recorded tracks and shared them on social media. His music was a reflection of his inner world. The lyrics are full of anger, pain from a difficult childhood, searching for himself in this cruel world. At the time of his arrest, he did not have a permanent job. His criminal history included minor offenses related to hooliganism in his youth, but there was nothing like what he did to Aiia. However, rage was boiling inside him. Psychologists who examined him after his arrest noted that his impulsivity and lack of control over emotions were the result of unresolved traumas from the past. I want to emphasize that these details do not justify his actions, but only explain how a man with such a past could have come to such a terrible crime. The police found no evidence that Herman was acquainted with Aiia. There were no personal contacts between them, nor digital traces linking them. They didn't know each other, and that's a fact. But what's strange is that the police found out that Herman had tried to get into her apartment complex twice in the 6 weeks before the crime. He tried to enter the apartment complex and told the students that he had lost the key. It was a lie. He did not live there, and at that time had no permanent place of residence. He returned a few days later and was seen standing on the grass outside the building. Forensic psychiatrists described him as a man with low intelligence and weak self-regulation. But importantly, they found no signs of psychosis in him, noting that he understood what he was doing. The attack on Aiia, specifically on her, I want to emphasize this, was not planned. He just saw an opportunity to attack her, and, unfortunately, she had no chance to escape. She was an accidental victim, but whether the crime itself was impulsive was the next question. Let's try to figure this out. Herman claimed that he could not remember where he got the metal pipe, or the means with which he poured over the body and set it on fire after the attack. This aspect of the case was extremely important because it had to determine whether the crime was premeditated or not. Police obtained surveillance footage showing Herman loitering around the mall shortly before the attack, and he was not holding an object that looked like a metal pipe. But still, investigators noted that there was some element of premeditation in this crime, and it consisted in the fact that Herman launched the attack with a pipe in his hand. This means that he did not pick up the pipe somewhere on the ground during the fight against Aiia. When he approached her, there was already a pipe in his hand. He used her to quickly knock Aiia unconscious so that she wouldn't have a chance to defend herself, try to escape, or call for help. Even so, police concluded there was no clear evidence of premeditation in the classic sense. The attack was described as unsophisticated and opportunistic, with little sign of planning. Detectives found no evidence that Herman had prepared or concealed the pipe in advance with the intent to use it in the commission of a crime. With plenty of evidence, forensic results, and witness statements, investigators were able to piece together the timeline of that night. Aiia had just stepped off the tram. The time was 12:12 a.m. A few streetlights dimly lit the road she walked. Around her were bushes, the parking lot of a shopping mall, and quiet apartment buildings. She often took this path alone, never imagining the danger ahead. She was still on the phone with her sister when Herman came up behind her with a metal pipe in his hand and, without saying a word, struck her 4 times in the head. Her sister heard Aiia's scream through the line. Aiia didn't give up easily. She turned, scratched, even cursed at Herman in Arabic, fighting back as best she could. But the head injuries were devastating. She collapsed, unconscious. Herman dragged her behind a low hedge near the parking lot. He tore at her clothes, and what followed was horrific. Before leaving, he picked up the pipe again and struck her several more times. Then, as if that wasn't enough, he sprayed her body with accelerant from a canister and set it on fire. The fire failed to destroy the evidence as he had hoped. Instead, it only deepened the horror of the crime. The entire attack lasted no more than 15 minutes. As Herman fled, he climbed over a fence, dropping his baseball cap in the process. He also pulled off his t-shirt, stained with blood, and left the scene. The trial began on October 1st, 2019. Herman entered the courtroom with his head bowed, and his lawyers immediately stressed that their client was remorseful. He had written a letter to the Maasarwe family, asking for forgiveness and admitting that he had destroyed their lives forever. He wrote, "I'm sorry, your daughter didn't deserve such a terrible and tragic thing to happen to her. I don't expect forgiveness, as I will never be able to forgive myself, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends. There is no excuse. I truly apologize. I will pray for you and your family every day. Love, goodbye." But for Aiia's family, those words were empty. To them, he was nothing more than the monster who had taken their daughter. It could have been a lengthy trial, but due to the fact that Herman pleaded guilty to the charges against him, the family avoided a lengthy trial. Before the judge passed a sentence, he reviewed all the available evidence in the case. The forensic medical expert, speaking in court, said that Aiia spent the last minutes of her life experiencing severe pain and horror. In an attempt to mitigate Herman's responsibility, his lawyers pointed to a difficult childhood. They hired a psychiatrist who described Herman as a product of the system. The psychiatrist also stated that the defendant had a low IQ, that he was impulsive, but had no malicious intent. However, the prosecutor challenged that claim, saying that a difficult childhood is no excuse, and that the attack was cowardly and brutal, and any remorse came far too late. Before pronouncing the verdict, the judge noted that Herman's difficult past, mental problems, and his remorse had been taken into account, but, according to the judge, nothing could justify what he had done. On October 29, 2019, Cody Herman was sentenced to 36 years in prison. He will not be eligible for early release for 30 years. The judge noted that Herman poses a serious risk to society, but his youth and lack of previous convictions do not allow him to impose a life sentence. Later, prosecutors filed an appeal, trying to appeal the verdict and achieve a life sentence, but in 2021, the Victorian Court of Appeal upheld Herman's original sentence.